Hey, everybody. Welcome to another Three Nails Information Security Podcast. I'm Vincent Mintz, founder of Three Nails InfoSec. Today, I am joined by Mark Ashworth, who is a CISO at First Bank. Mark, would you start us off telling a bit about yourself?
Well, thanks for having me, Vincent. So I'm Mark Ashworth. I'm the Senior Vice President, Chief Information Security Officer at First Bank, based out of the St. Louis area. We're in a regional bank located in 6 states. About half the business is out in California, the other half is in the Midwest. I've been in the business now for, it's hard to believe, about 32, 33 years, and been in security full time, I'll say, for the past 7 to 8 years now. I kind of got started with it all from a movie back when I was a teenager, and there was a little movie from the 80s called WarGames, and went to saw that, walked out. I was like, that's what I want to do. And so that's kind of where I kind of got things kicked off. I think I was in 7th or 8th grade and got a computer for Christmas that year and started programming, and career was born. So, and I've dabbled in everything. I've been a developer. I've been on the mid-range computers, desktops, got into networking, and system Windows administration and migrations from NT4 to 2000, and been in multiple industries from healthcare to manufacturing to finance. So, I've kind of been all over the board, from small companies to Fortune 100. So nice big, resume of experience, I guess, so to speak. So been all over the place.
And I know you mentioned you haven't published anything, but we were talking offline about a book you've been working on for a little while surrounding ransomware, which we'll get into a little bit today. So hopefully we can kind of get some insight from that. So with that said, one thing that I noticed about what you just described is you went from a very technical standpoint, it sounds like, even developing, to where you're at now, which I think, it's probably best for CISOs to have, deeper technical knowledge than other positions for sure. So I think that that really fits like your image, your picture. But how do you feel like that has allowed you to communicate, to executives now that you are, considered executive? How do you feel like it's helped you to like communicate the important things in security and whatnot to higher level executives? And I think I'm more so asking for like people who maybe want to transition, at some point.
Sure. Well, I also, back in college, worked in the hotel industry, and I was a front desk clerk. So, getting that customer service experience, I think, was huge, and it's definitely been a driving factor for me. And I've been in management for 20 years, so it's not like this is my first management position. So I've been dealing with executives and boards for 15 to 20 years, and owners of companies, and doctors and everything else. And so having that translation ability sometimes is hard, because you get carried away talking about the technology, and you forget that now you're jumping up in the technical side, and you need to bring it down to the people in the room. And so I try to do my best there to be the chief translation officer, I think is probably a better term for it. But and so it's really all in the presentation, and you have to be able to relate to your audience, be able to talk to the audience and say, here's this technology whizzing here, and now how do I convert that into something that they understand? And it's translating that into business, or into business risk, or how they can make money off of it, or how it's going to cost money off, depending on if you're looking at the technology side of it or a risk side of it. So it's really that translation. And, I always say, it's all in the presentation, and it really is. It's how you present it to the others that's in the room. And getting that is a skill I work on every day because, like I said, sometimes I get carried away and I get excited about what I'm talking about, and then I have to dial it back. And usually, my boss will be the one that'll say, "So, what does this mean?" Actually, it's like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Here we go," and then I'll convert. So, it's really that translation that you have to do.
Mm. I'm curious. I've never been a CISO, so this is just a transparent question. But what are some of the things that you find to be most challenging to communicate with higher level executives, and things that you want backing to purchase or whatever to move forward with? What are some of those challenges that are have been the most difficult?
I think sometimes the hardest challenge is getting them to understand the risk and the risk to the organization. And you'll have some that you're working with that gets that, and then others that don't understand that. And then so it becomes that education that you have to do. So it might take time to educate them on what the problem is, what the risk is to the organization, and how it can affect their group. Because we're all responsible for security in the organization. It's not just me. It's not just my team. Everyone's responsible for security. And whether it's following the policies and procedures that are in place, or best practices, or whatever it might be, or just awareness, from a phishing perspective or a BEC email. So having that awareness and making sure everyone understands that and the ramifications of it is sometimes, I think, the challenge, and getting them to communicate that down to their responsible groups and everyone that works underneath them, to get to push that down as much as to push it up.
Do you ever miss being on the more technical side?
As I get older, no. I mean, technology is it's a lifelong learning thing. And and depending on the specialty, it becomes more and more. I always say that, developers change slowly over time. And then you have the hardware people, they're changing a little faster. And then you have that might be, every 6 months or so, and then the networking is kind of that same component. And then cyber changes by the minute. And so, there's just so much to keep up on. And then the expectation of the cyber teams is that they know everything, about development, about the hardware, about the operating systems, and all that's networking and all that components. So there's a lot of pressure there to understand that, and to kind of be that source of knowledge, and stay out of troubleshooting sometimes, because security teams are really good at forensic work. And what is forensics? A lot of times is just figuring out what's the problem. And so sometimes it's easy for groups to punt it over to security, say it's a security issue, and then now you're guilty until proven innocent, right? That it's not a security issue. It's an application running on some desktop that's causing the problem. So there's a balance there, and from an operational standpoint, that you have to do.
Okay. I kind of want to jump into some of your background. I know I sort of talked about your book. I think what I found really interesting is that you're writing it on ransomware specifically. Will you tell us just a little bit about the the context or content of that book, or what led you to sort of want to write a book about ransomware specifically?
Okay. Well, I'll say it's been paused. I'll say at that point. So this started out kind of as during COVID and all that sort of things, and ransomware was really starting to pick up and becoming bigger. And even today, you don't see a lot of discussion at the executive level. It stays at the IT level, and especially not at the board level. So the premise of the book was that translation of what does ransomware truly mean to the organization from a risk and from an executive or board level, and then explaining basically zero trust to help educate board members and executives on what that means, and to be able to talk informatively to their IT executives and to their other IT counterparts. So it's really that translation again on that, and and probably despite on how I sound on this podcast right now, I'm not normally a very wordy person, and so I kind of got about 40 to 50 pages in, and I kind of ran out of content, and I'm like, okay, well, what do I need to see? And I'm shooting for 100 pages, and I need to pick it back up, reread it, make tweaks somewhere at and then kind of start adding to it again. I need to do that at some point, and because I think the book's still relevant, it's the industry shifted a little bit. And I think there's some things that could be updated, because it's not all now about locking it down and just the double ransom, because some of them, they're not even, encrypting the files. They're just holding you for ransom and claiming that they have the data. So some of the techniques has changed a little bit. And so there could be some updating off there, but the premise, I think, is still valid.
So they're just kind of stealing the data, threatening to leak it unless you pay, basically.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And even if they do encrypt it, they're still doing that part of it to try to get a double ransom out of you. So if not more.
Sure. Okay. And you mentioned zero trust. Are you able to sort of share how zero trust and, micro-segmentation is another key term you kind of brought up offline, are sort of evolving as ransomware sort of evolves itself, becomes more sophisticated, more common?
Yeah. So, you don't hear the term zero trust quite as much as I think what you were about 2 years ago, but really the principles is there. And I think a lot of it is really kind of morphed a lot to the identity side and protecting the identity of things. And I think that's very important. And that's definitely a main pillar of zero trust, is protecting the identity. And then the other component of it is really around the network and the segmentation. And I think part of it, I think it's a lot easier to, in some sense, a lot easier to lock down identity and to try to, protect that than it is in a large legacy network to microsegment. And, because especially if it's been around for a long period of time, they might have some VLANs and stuff out there, but they haven't really segmented it off, maybe by application type or, whatever, however that, it's fit for your organization. And so I think there's a bigger challenge there with that. Some of the more due diligent ones are doing that. The government has, been mandated to do that within their organizations through some of the executive orders, but it's not an easy challenge, and it's not going to be something you're going to do over a couple of months. Maybe with a small network and for a small organization, you can probably do that. But for the most part, most organizations, it's a challenge to do, but it's also highly effective, because even if identity fails, which it does because of compromised credentials or whatever, if they can't move laterally within the network because of ACLs or firewalls or however that you implement microsegmentation, they still can't do anything. They're still locked down to that workstation or to that device that had been originally compromised. So the more you can lock that one device down and keep that lateral movement from happening, the better off you're going to be. And it's going to prevent ransomware from spreading, malware from spreading, or someone gaining access from a phishing email, dropping malware on the machine and trying to hop between other areas, even if they do get credentials. So that's a huge step.
Yeah, thanks for sharing about that. We do some ransomware assessments too, sort of emulating threats like ransomware. Obviously not maliciously, but I think it surprises a lot of people to see that. If you can initially get by sort of the static analysis that the EDRs and the scanners and things have on a piece of malware, dynamically, like not a lot of them do a very good job, especially for a ransomware. But it's always interesting to see how different corporations are sort of securing their networks against ransomware. I think for ransomware specifically, it matters a lot about your principle of least privilege, not reusing passwords, all the fundamental stuff. But I'm sure as we, progress in time that we'll see more sophisticated means. I know with the emergence of AI, there will probably be a lot of behavior analysis, AI based products, sort of watching for files being encrypted and whatnot. But
Mhm.
with that said, do you see AI sort of bringing genuine value to the industry, or how can somebody even, you know, gauge if AI is bringing value if they're choosing to implement it or use it?
Yeah, I mean, AI is definitely bringing value now and will continue to, especially as it becomes more stable, more trustworthy. We know that there's still problems with hallucinations and that sort of things when it comes to information gathering. But having it analyze large sources of data, like let's say for credit card fraud or debit card fraud, there's large amounts of transaction data that's happening very quickly, and AI can do a fantastic job of analyzing that and comparing that based off past behaviors. Likewise, network traffic analysis to quickly analyze and looking for anomalies and I think that's going to continue to get better. UEBA has been, I think, pretty poor in my opinion. There's a lot of products that says that they have, user behavior analysis that's there, but it's really hasn't been very accurate as far as I'm concerned. There's a lot of high false positives, and I hope that AI becomes a better tool to truly analyze that and to be able to provide a more meaningful alerting process and maybe playbook, SOAR type of reactions and stuff with that. So, I think a lot of it's really going to be around that overall large data analysis, looking for anomalies, looking for maybe certain investments that might be better than the other, or those sort of things. Not just from a security perspective, but how can you run your business better? The biggest thing is for those groups that are doing that is just making sure that they have some security oversight off there to make sure that they're not sharing data to a public model or anything along that line, and that it's really self-contained within just their data is really important. It could still provide some knowledge off of there, but it needs to make sure it's being anomalized and truly not any data that you're there that could risk, either PII being leaked or maybe intellectual property or anything along that line.
Definitely. I would definitely like to see more, private models for sure being leveraged. I think a lot of people are probably just using, ChatGPT, their public stuff to upload, all their, or at least analyze files and whatnot. And,
Mm-hmm.
it's like, how would they know if we're doing that? So I
Right.
guess that's just a challenge in itself. But I'm curious if you think if there's any sort of maybe like misconceptions or just untrue beliefs or thoughts, or maybe we don't even know to say untrue, but any misconceptions that executives are sort of facing surrounding cybersecurity or the advancement of AI. Have you had to sort of deal with anything like that?
Yeah, I think the biggest issue is that it's not a one all save all type thing. There just because you implemented it for one business case doesn't mean you're going to start saving a whole bunch of money in the organization. You're going to reduce FTEs or anything along that line. I mean, there might be certain instances where that might be the case, but I think those are going to be far and in between. For most companies that I've heard of and talked to, the ones that are starting to reap benefits from AI are the ones that have multiple business cases that they're starting to see. Each one of them is providing a little more and more and more value, and collectively they're starting to provide maybe some savings or increase in revenues or whatever it might be. And I think as it matures and there's more plug and play type modules that, into different lines of applications, that that'll continue to increase, and we'll see better ROI on it. But right now, it's costly to implement. It's costly to maintain. The price per cycle is expensive, and whether you have it on premise or do it through the cloud. So, more and more applications are building it in. But as they do that, you have to ask those questions of how secure is my data now? Who all is seeing this data, or am I seeing other customers' data, or being, blended, and all those sort of things. Kind of back to what we were talking about just a moment ago. So, it's going to happen. There's going to be value to it. It's just going to take, I think, a little more time.
Mm. Do you kind of see, my specific industry, which is, offensive security, pen testing, red teaming,
Mm-hmm.
do you feel like there's any possibility that it sort of gets impacted by AI? And I think easy answer, yes, but I'm curious in your point of view, how you see, roles like us as security companies coming to assess like yours. What do you think is sort of on the precipice for us? Like what's coming, in your opinion?
Yeah. So first off, I want to kind of say I don't like the term offensive security. And here's the reason why. It means that you're going out and doing something, so the NSA is doing offensive security. The Russians are doing offensive security towards us. We're being more, I think proactive security is probably a better term, where you're being more proactive and having a firm like yours to come in and do a pen test to our organization, from the outside. What can you do? How can you get in? What systems can you access? Those sort of things. So I think proactive security and defensive security are two better terms versus offensive. Okay, so my little soapbox there is done. But where I see it happening, and you're starting to see certain products out there that are trying to leverage AI, and how much of it truly is AI versus, really being still rule-based machine learning. It's, TBD, but, is that type of going through known exploits and running through them and hitting your target and trying to manipulate through there and doing that in a more of an automated fashion on a regular process. Again, how much is that AI? I don't know. I know a lot of them are calling it AI, but how much of that is marketing versus what we've been seeing, previously? Is it making rash decisions that's actually saying, okay, I'm seeing this vulnerability, and it knows that these type of things are exploits for that type of vulnerability, or is that a rule that says to do that? That's that fine line of really knowing on that. But I see that continuing to grow. And then also, maybe even being in on the network, and, a box running on the network, and then analyzing the traffic that's going on there, and then reacting to that traffic in a pen testing type of fashion, and not from a defensive component of here's an anomaly, and then let's go off, do this. Maybe it's sniffing the network, and it finds a credential, so it goes and then starts to weed through like a worm into your environment, and and do those sort of things. I see those type of things growing and becoming valuable, and especially for more red teams or purple teams that's within an organization, if they got them, and being able to do that, or for companies like yourself that could place something in there and then automatically detect that and then spring off of it and do a non-malicious exploit to a system and show the vulnerabilities and what could happen type deal.
Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, I think most security researchers I've heard sort of speak on the topic are very much so of the same mind that, right now AI is meant to augment and, be more of a tool, a automation, sort of resource. I agree. I agree with what you're saying too. I think I'm curious, where, you have a few like emerging companies that are kind of taking this space pretty rapidly as far as AI penetration testing goes, which is cool to see. But yeah, definitely, I have all the same constraints, which, we'll leverage it occasionally and more so to speed up some of the menial tasks and whatnot in every test. But yeah, it's interesting to hear your perspective. So Well, Mark, do you have any other sort of thoughts or opinions you'd like to share before we sort of close out? I mean, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast today, but you want to leave us with anything today?
Yeah, just to kind of talk a little bit more about the AI and the pen testing and stuff. I think there's going to be, uh, uh, you see it now with code analysis and code creation. AI does a really good job of providing you with a base of a particular language. In any language, you tell it what you want, you'll get a nice little routine, and you got to actually validate it, make sure it is what you want. But it does a very good job of doing that. And so taking a known exploit and having to create the code off of it, I think AI is going to help with that. And I can see where things can happen with that a lot quicker, and it's going to accelerate not only the bad guys, but also hopefully the good guys too, on how do you block this exploit. And but then to take someone like it and with your company and having a tester coming in, and maybe that you're coming up against an obstacle against a certain security tool that might be on a system, you might be able to then query ChatGPT and say, what's any known exploits of this, and so then take that and then run with that to see if you can create a chain of attacks that would eventually allow you to compromise that, maybe even through a no-click or something. So, being able to take that and quickly do that, but you still need to have that human interaction to be able to put it all together and to really understand when to do that. And that's where that balance and enhancement of AI, I think, is really going to be for the proactive security, type practitioners and stuff like yourself. So.
Do you feel like Gen AI could potentially take the place of a human at some point? I mean, they project.
Not Gen AI. No,
You
I
don't
don't
think?
think it. No, not Gen AI. So, I think there are, other forms of AI that will be at some point, but, depending on who you talk to, it could be next year. Others, it's 50 years from now. So it may never happen. So, it's gonna happen, but the Gen AI is so different because it's really taking known stuff and then combining that information and regurgitating that out. That's what that's really good for. But you need that cognitive thinking, and Gen AI is not doing that.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just curious at what point, because I hear these reports of Gen AI at some point becoming smarter than humans, and so I'm like, yeah, I mean, I guess like what is so unique about the human element that it requires us still, and
Yeah.
we could probably go on for another 15, 20 minutes easily.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at chess playing. Now humans can't keep up with chess playing, but it's a very set thing, right? There's set moves. There's a finite amount of moves that can be done, and it can very quickly determine where your positioning is, look at all the possible combinations that might be there, and then find a way to get around it much faster than what a human could. So those sort of instances, it's really good, but it's a very finite thing. It's not truly thinking. It's looking at all the options based off of known variables.
That's great.
It's just simple mathematics, really, on that part of it. And so the world is around mathematics, and so it's just a matter of being able to compute that and do it very quickly.
That's a good point. Right now, I'd say there's probably infinite amount of different configurations, of different computers, web servers, so maybe AI will eventually become proficient at hacking these things, but I think you're right. Like the human element, the intuition, all the things that we bring really, bring a lot of value. So, awesome, Mark. Thank you so much for coming on today, man. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was a really neat conversation, and thank you for coming and sharing all your wisdom with us. So, if anybody wants to reach out to you, how can they reach out?
best ways off of LinkedIn. So reach out to me on LinkedIn, and you can see like I have written a lot of articles. There's a lot of different articles out there, other podcasts, webinars, and that sort of stuff. And I make various comments from here and time so on things. But yeah, thanks for having me. It was a great conversation, great questions, and be happy to do it again sometime.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark. Appreciate you again.